Good morning. I'm Karen Valentine, the Director of Guidance, and this morning's College and Coffee is talking about standardized testing and the importance of testing in the college admission process. You're going to be hearing not only from our college counselors today, but several of our guidance counselors as well. And we're going to do this in small sections, and hopefully you did pick up the handouts, and we won't be reading from them. Of course, you can read those later, but do keep them and use them to refer to later. We're going to begin this morning with Mrs. Jackie Ford.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Jackie Ford, and I have for freshmen and sophomores the GUM group, G to M. For juniors, the HUM group, H to M. So that's who I work with from at this point. What I wanted to talk to you about today is setting a testing plan. When do students take tests, and what should they be taking? I would like to start first with next week, October 17th. On our calendar, we have what's called a testing day. Freshmen will take a plan test, P-L-A-N, which is actually a practice ACT. And we give this to our students so that they have an opportunity to see the different formats of testing. And so the plan test is given to the freshmen. They will receive in December a score report that will have a local score, which means that they're compared to other Chaminade students. And then there will be a national score on which they are compared to 10th graders nationally. So don't panic when you see that national score, or rejoice when you see it if they did really well on that. The juniors, the sophomores and the juniors will be taking a practice SAT. For the sophomores, I always tell them it's a practice SAT. Because it's the first time they're taking the practice SAT, and it gives them an opportunity to see not only the format of the test, but also to get scores back and to find out in enough time where their strengths and weaknesses are. You will get a score folder back from them in December, and it contains a tremendous amount of information. So when you get that folder, please read the announcements to make sure you know that the folders are going to the students, because we usually pass them out at lunchtime. And it is not unknown that a parent will call and the student will have this nice handout crumpled somewhere inside their backpack. But we always keep a copy on file in case you can't find the one that your son or daughter has. But those will be available in December. For the 11th graders, the practice SAT is a very important test because it's a National Merit Scholarship qualifying test. And so for that reason, we really encourage our juniors to take this very, very seriously. I encourage my sophomores to take it seriously, because the one thing you want to know is, where am I good and where do I need help? And if I just kind of, brush it off, then I'm not really getting good information for myself. Now, some of you, all sophomores and juniors, were actually given a practice test booklet that looks like this. So if you haven't seen it around your house, if you're a sophomore or junior parent, you might ask your child where it is. Inside of this nice folder is a practice SAT test for them to work on. If juniors especially, if you do nothing else, you should at least go through this practice test so that you get an idea of what's going on. Sophomores as well. And this way you can actually get an idea of what this test is going to be like. And I think it's reassuring for some students, because they look at it and go, oh, I can do this, I can do this. And for other students, they can take it to their teachers, especially their math teacher, and say, I know we did this at some point, but can you help me out a little bit? We did have 2 workshops. Hopefully your students attended those. We had one on September 27th for math and one on October 1st for critical reading. If your child was not able to attend those, if you go to Blackboard and either sophomore page, if you have a sophomore child, or junior counseling page at Blackboard, When you get there, on the left side will be something called documents, or you can just look at the announcement itself, and it will have the handouts from those 2 practice workshops that we had. So if you want to see what the workshops were about, they're there, all right? In terms of a plan for testing, what we ask our students to do is we recommend that our juniors in the spring of junior year take an SAT and/or an ACT. We really like our students to take both because sometimes they do really much better on one than the other. Some students don't want to do that. Well, we're not telling them they have to, but all juniors should have at least one SAT or ACT completed before the end of their junior year. The reason we recommend spring of junior year is because they have completed a 5th semester of high school. So it gives them a little bit of an edge, okay? Now, we know that I'm working with students, and I have drama students. There's no way they're going to be able to take a March SAT. So for those students, taking one in January will still have allowed them to complete that 1st semester. So there are some students who are really gung-ho, and they're already taking SATs and ACTs, and that's okay. They may want to repeat it. And yes, a student may repeat an SAT or an ACT, and they can repeat it more than once if they wish. If they take their test, let's say the student takes a test in junior year and then they feel like they just haven't had a lot of time to prepare and they would like to do it again, they could take the summer to prepare and do an October test in senior year. But we do not recommend that as their first test at all. We want them to do one in junior year. Okay? There's also another type of testing. Yes?
How often are those tests offered?
They're offered October, November, December, January, March, and May and June. So several times during the year. And we do have folders that you can pick up in the guidance office if you need those dates. But they're offered very many times. And pretty similar for the ACT. Actually, the ACTs are offered on alternate months. So like September for an ACT, you know, so it's, some of them are in alternate times, okay? There's also something called subject tests. We recommend students take subject tests, particularly if they're applying to high-profile schools or schools that, there are some schools that just really want the subject test. And a subject test is this. It's a test that takes in the content of a specific subject area. These are tests that high school teachers have looked at and said, yeah, 92% of English teachers say, we teach what's on the literature test, you know. 82% of science teachers say, we teach what's on those science tests, okay? So these tests should be taken as a student completes a class. So world history students would take a world history test in sophomore year. And we recommend June 1st this year is a subject test for a subject test time. These are 1-hour tests. They are Scantron based. A student may take as many as 3 on one day. They come in 5 areas: literature, math, foreign language, history, and science. When a student completes pre-calculus, if they are especially interested in engineering, math, or science major, they should take the Math 2C, which means Math 2 with a calculator. And so if they're sophomores doing honors pre-cal or pre-cal, then it would be appropriate for them to take it at the end of sophomore year. If they're juniors, at the end of junior year for the Math 2. Some students are taking AP exams, and so they might want to take the subject test in May when their AP exam is happening. I like to have the students who are not AP students, but the college prep students, look at June because May 30th is their last day. They've spent all week preparing for their final exams. Guess what? They've also spent all week preparing for the subject test, which is coming on June 1st, 2 days after their finals. So that's a great time for them. When a student finishes honors chem, that's a great time to take the chemistry test. When they finish their 3rd year of a foreign language, they should look at, if they're not taking a 4th year, then they should look at the possibility of taking the foreign language. Foreign language, there are 2 types of tests. One's a reading only test, and the other is reading with listening. The reading with listening, if you are a native speaker and you do really well, may be helpful to you, but the reading test is the one usually that most students will take. Okay. What happens when you take a subject test is this. You will be given an opportunity to mark score choice. If you choose score choice, it means that you will literally choose which subject test you want sent to colleges. So let's say you take the world history test at the end of sophomore year and you don't do really well on it and you go, gosh, now I've got a bad score to report. You do not have to report that if you choose score choice. If you don't have choose score choice then, and you ask that your subject test be sent, all of them will be sent to the colleges. Colleges look at these kind of like, you know, how well prepared are you to pick up the next level class or the college level class, or, you know, so. Okay.
No need to applause each time. Thank you. I'm going to just very briefly talk about a couple of things rather than take the time to explain the differences in detail between the SAT and the ACT. Basically, I gave you a handout, and for those of you who came in late, we are going to scan all the handouts and put them online. So if you didn't get one, you can get it online later. Just watch for an email from me. But on this handout, it explains briefly the differences between the two. The SAT is a reasoning test. It's called the SAT reasoning test for that exact description of the test. You have to think about what they're asking and sometimes use logic to figure out the response that's correct, rather than simply a straight math calculation or looking at a grammar error. But you can read that handout and it'll tell you a fair amount about the differences. There are many students who do very well academically, have high GPA, but they don't test well on standardized tests. One of the websites that I strongly recommend you take a look at is called fairtest.org. And fairtest.org has a list of nearly 850 colleges and universities that are considered to be test optional. What that means is they generally have a fairly high academic standard for GPA, strength of rigor, things like that. But they allow students to submit test scores if they wish, but they will also admit students without submitting SAT and ACT. Oftentimes, students will apply to those colleges, get their acceptance, and then send their SAT or ACT scores later to be used for placement purposes rather than admission purposes. So there are a lot of schools listed under fairtest.org. I actually went online this morning and printed out the list of schools. It took 21 pages, and it's very small print. Okay? So there are a lot of colleges and universities that are considered to be test optional. So that's another avenue for some of you to think about if your child does have trouble with standardized testing. We're going to be talking about test prep and other ways to help raise those scores shortly. Mr. Fuller, one of our college counselors, is going to speak to you for a few minutes next.
Good morning. I'm going to talk specifically to the seniors and senior parents. We're right at the end of senior testing. Their last test date should be December. So there's a December 1st SAT and a December 8th ACT. That's the absolute last time they should be taking a SAT test or an ACT to get into a college. They've already taken it 3 times. They shouldn't take it again, just to caveat that as well. With that said, if your student is applying to a Cal State or a UC and they're taking a December SAT or ACT, they need to send the scores directly to the school, meaning when they register, they should be indicating which schools they're sending those scores to. So they will not receive their scores and then send them. They're just going to send them blind, if you will. Some seniors will actually take one of the tests in January or March. This often occurs for scholarship purposes. Many schools will give merit-based scholarships based on a combination of GPA and test score. At least once a year or more, we have students that are 1 point or a few points on the SAT away from securing a couple more $1,000s a year. So they try to take the SAT or ACT again just to get them up into that next scholarship level. So if that is your student, encourage them, but please find out from the school first if they will honor a March or January SAT or ACT first. And then lastly, for sending scores, Chaminade does not put test scores on their transcripts, which means that your students must send their scores to every single school they apply to. If they're applying to 11 different schools, that can be a pretty hefty sum. To send the SAT, it's $11. When you send the SAT, it sends all of the scores. We'll talk about score choice later, but when you send the SAT, you send every score, including subject exams. And then for the SAT, it's $11 per sitting that you send. So if you send multiple sittings, you're paying double or triple that $11. To save you a little bit of cash, if your student's applying to multiple Cal States, if you use the code 3594, it will actually send to every single Cal State, and then you only have to pay for it once. And then if you're applying to a UC, if they're applying to 2 or 3, I encourage you to send it to all. But if you're applying to 6, sometimes 7 UCs we've seen, if you send it to 1 or 2, all of the UCs will get your scores. So you don't have to keep sending in scores, and you can save a little bit in the very expensive application process. With that, I'm going to go over to Mr. Borchard.
How are you all doing? So I will be talking about test prep. So you guys have now heard about the SAT, ACT, PSAT, a lot of information about those exams. So the next question is, how does my child get ready to take them? All right, as you probably know, there's tons of different programs out there. All right, there's a lot of different paid programs that, you know, we're not going to talk about today, but if you guys are interested, we have a lot of information up in the counseling office. All right, I am going to point out some different free programs for your students, one of them being primarily through Naviance, which most of your students are already using, researching schools, building up their resume, and a lot of other features that the counselors constantly talk with your students about. Okay, so the first one that I'm going to talk about today is called Prep Me. Okay, when you log on to Family Connections, you're going to see right here it says Prep Me. All right, when you click on Prep Me, it's going to take you to this page here. Okay, what this allows you to do is, you can see it has SAT and ACT scores up there, so you can start prepping for this. The first thing you do, or your child does, I should say, is they take a diagnostics test. All right, this allows the site to kind of analyze what their weak points are, their strong points, and it develops a student-based program that has weekly assignments, lessons, quizzes, everything like that that's based off of what they did on that diagnostics test. All right, and what this site also allows them to do is keep track of their progress. You know, so after they've completed this many lessons, they took another quiz. Are their scores getting better? All right, so it's just a free resource for you guys that is fantastic. Once you take the diagnostics test, you enter, like I said, you enter the test date that you're planning. You know, so for a lot of our students, we were recommending as juniors that they take the test either January or March. They put in that test date, and the system will develop that plan for them to be ready by that test date. Okay, if they're going to take it later, it'll space it out a little bit more so that they're ready by that test date. Okay. Once they do that, they follow their schedule, and then they're ready to take the test. It's a very laid out process for them. If they say skip a week, and they're gone on a trip, or they're doing sporting events or something like that, it allows them to go back and make those up and then catch up. All right, it's not going to penalize them or anything like that. All right, the other nice thing about it is, as counselors, we can go in and see what they've been working on too. You know, so we can, if they have questions, we can go and be like, oh, I see that you've put a lot of work in on your math, not so much your critical reading, you know, what's going on with that. All right, so that's something else that we're looking into being able to do. Okay, so besides the PrepMe, there are other free online sites that you can utilize, and those can all be found under the Blackboard, under your student's junior or sophomore Blackboard page. Let's see here. So under the junior page, when you go to external links, you're going to see at the very bottom here, free test prep links. All right, and these are all sites that provide another form of free test prep online. Okay, so these are all tools that you can utilize as well. I did want to mention that we have 2 practice tests coming up, a practice SAT, also a practice ACT. This is in addition to the PSAT that they are taking on October 17th, next Wednesday. All right, so this Saturday, we actually have one that is the practice SAT, okay? It's through Revolution Prep. And so if you want your son or daughter to register for that, or they want to, if you go to the Documents tab under Blackboard at the very bottom, you're going to see right here, the 13th. And when you open this up, it goes to the flyer, it gives you the website, and it gives you the phone number that you can call or go to in order to register them for that practice test. All right, there will be a follow-up session that gives them the scores and some different strategies to help them build up their skills in preparation for the actual test. All right, on the 27th, you'll see right here is the practice ACT, okay? So on the 27th, it's the same process. This one is through Kaplan, and so the website and the phone number will be there, and you can go on there and your student can register for that exam as well. Okay, once again, both of these are free, and there's follow-up sessions to give them the scores and give them some suggestions.
It's a full test?
It's pretty much a full test. It's a little bit shorter than the actual test, but it does involve all the components of the exam. All right. So, you know, there is a lot of other test prep out there. That is all up for you guys to decide on what you want to do. I just wanted to point out some of these free options for you. The one through Naviance is a fantastic program that we have purchased for all the students. That is free for your students, and it has a lot of features and a lot of tools that will help them. I was looking at the critical reading, which I know a lot of our students have difficulty with, and there was 23 different lessons for it and about 15 different quizzes for critical reading alone. All right, and so what the system does, it'll highlight the ones that they need to work on the most.
How often are you required to meet with each student, say a junior, every year? Is there like one fall semester meeting and one?
We will meet with our students at least once a semester. Oftentimes I meet with my students 2 to more times than that. Okay. But yeah, it's once a semester.
And is it basically elicited from the student to go and make an appointment with you?
No, if they sign up earlier, then we'll get to them a little bit sooner. Otherwise, we have our list and we make sure we get every student. Yes, and we have specific things that we talk about.
The testing that, or the tests that are on Naviance that you can take, are those updated annually so that say if they did it as a sophomore ahead of time, it'll be a different thing to go through as try again as a junior? Or?
Theoretically, yes. We just got we got this program, a few weeks ago.
Oh.
You know, so we've been doing a lot of research on it, but everything we've seen is fantastic.
That's great.
Okay?
Thank you.
Sorry, one last question.
Okay, and is this you've got a ninth grader, is this also something that we should do as a ninth grader?
Well, there is a PSAT component that you can do test prep for. That's going to be primarily leading up to the junior year one. So as freshmen, it's not something they need to use. It would be more designed for before the PSAT junior year and from then on. Okay? All right, and I will be passing it on to Mrs. Benning, who will be talking about another test prep program that is primarily through library.
Hi, I'm Mrs. Benning. I'm the librarian. I've been here almost exactly a year. I started last October, just before Halloween, and my daughter went to Chaminade. She graduated in 2009, and she's now at BYU. So I've been on your end of it. When I was at the Las Virgenes Unified School District, we started with Schmoop, and we found it to be quite successful. How many of you have ever heard of Schmoop before today? Nobody, good. The kids love Schmoop. It takes test prep and literature guides and learning guides and makes them fun, and incorporates like pop culture and things like that into the learning, and so the kids really, really like it. Now, they didn't always have outside advertising. This is something that's new. So before it wasn't. Now maybe they're so popular, I don't know, maybe they're getting people who want to advertise Disney. But what I've done is Schmoop is not, most of the Schmoop, the learning guides and those kinds of things are free. But the test prep is not, and through the library I've secured test prep for all the Chaminade students. So normally you would have to pay for it, but we have it for free for your students. You should have gotten, you're welcome, you should have gotten 2 Schmoop handouts of how to have your students log in. Some of them have already done this because their teachers are aware of this, and their teachers are using the teacher Schmoop accounts so that they can track their students. But some of the students have not signed up for their account yet. And so since it's a subscription and we pay for it, they actually have to create their own account. And it's super easy to do. But let me show you my website. Sorry, where I can spell .org. There are 2 websites, library websites. One of them is on the main chaminade.org site, and then I maintain my own library website because I need to have constant contact with it, and I update the content all the time. So this is my website. It's chaminadelibrary.org. And if you just go over here to databases and you hover over databases and click on hover over Schmoop for students. Okay, so it's chaminadelibrary.org, hover over databases, hover over Schmoop for students, click on that, and it takes a second to load the little page. This is basically what you guys have in your hand, and they can click on this www.schmoop.com/sign-up/Chaminade, and that is where they will create their account. Okay, so if I already have an account, so if I go to Schmoop, then you just go over here to log in. After they've created their account, they log in, and this is I'm logging in as if I'm a student, not a teacher, so this is what your students will see. So they log into Schmoop, and then they go up here to My Passes, click on that, and they have access to all the test prep. And I heard, I think it was Mrs. Valentine talking about subject testing, and they have subject tests as well. They have every AP test all these tests your students, I should say test prep, your students have access to. They can use. Well, let's go down here to the English language one. But they also have the subject test. They have the KC. They have something called ASVAB, and I think that's the military test or something. And they also have testing for, like, if you're going to become a securities guy or whatever. They have all kinds of test prep. So I just clicked on the AP English language. You notice that there was an overview, and then there's questions and answers. See, Julia Child's got nothing on this souffle or language skills. So they try to keep it light. So although the tone is light, the content is serious. It's written by it started with just Stanford PhDs, but now they've grown so big that they have other schools participating in their PhDs are writing content for Schmoop. So don't let the fact that it's really fun fool you, because the content is quite serious, and they're very, very good. So there are practice exams. Some of them have as many as 4 practice exams. Game day tips. That's what, how to best prep for test day. I also wanted to show you over here, if you go to All of Schmoop, and then you scroll down to College and Beyond, College 101, and this gives you all kinds of great information about how to do your essays, what they're looking for, what they're not looking for, guide to the college application, college admission essays, entrance tests, financial aid, saving for college scholarship, and stuff like that. So the College 101, the college readiness and college preparedness, what's it called, College and Beyond, is actually quite helpful as well. So this is free to your students. We're paying for it, and I'm kind of running it as a test this year. So I'd really like your input. I'd like your students' input. I was over Calabasas and Agoura High when I worked for Las Virgenes, and I had students come to me and say that they had just spent hours on Schmoop because it was so much fun. I mean, there's games and there's all kinds of stuff, and they just really, really enjoy it. So that's half the battle if you can get a student that likes it and will spend time on it. So that's Schmoop. And do you have any questions about Schmoop? Schmoop? They pronounce it Schmoop. It's a Yiddish word. No? Okay, so I would like your feedback and your students' feedback, because if you don't find it useful, then we won't pay for it next year. Why waste our money? But if it's something that you find quite useful, then we're happy to keep it as a tool.
Thank you very much. So as you can see, testing is a very large topic. This has gone, we've got way more information than we usually provide you at College and Coffee. So there are just a lot of facets to it. So I guess I'm going to attempt to try to wrap it up. We do realize that this is a very, probably of all the things we discuss, this and financial aid can be a little bit overwhelming. There's a lot of technical parts to it. When you do it, we do understand that in the current climate with college admissions and it being so selective, that with that goes up the anxiety about how important testing is, what role does it play. I'm not going to lie to you, testing is important. When we were at a conference in Denver last week, they presented us all the colleges in the United States. They surveyed them to see what are the most important things that they are considering in the application. And of course, GPA in their core academic classes was the top indicator of admissions. And then strength of curriculum was second, and the third factor is the test scores. Okay, so with that understood, we have gone to a lot of effort to make sure that all of our students have access to quality test prep, and that's why we have budgeted money for Schmoop and we've budgeted money for Prep Me, because we do realize that there are a lot of things that you're being asked to write checks for, and this is something we felt that we could provide so everyone has access to it. So please do utilize these. Prep Me is brand new. I am sending an email that has a tutorial attached to it for Prep Me, so you can look through it that way and get familiar with it. We're just getting familiar with it, so please do use that. Okay, two things that are probably most misunderstood with testing is the score choice. Okay, ACT has always had something, they don't call it score choice, but they've always had that you can send any particular ACT score. SAT had it at one point, then it went away, and then back by popular demand, I guess, in 2008, they brought it back. Okay, so what score choice means is that you are enabled to select a particular sitting to send. And while that sounds fabulous and lessens the pressure, there are a few caveats that come with that. The first one being that there are many colleges that ask you to disclose all your scores. They don't care that there is score choice. The more selective schools, you are actually saying, these are all my scores, okay? So with that comes the fear, well, I didn't do well when I took it in October, I was coming down with the flu, and I did horribly, and I did so much better. Schools are going to be taking whatever their highest scoring tactic is to admit your student or offer them admission to that school. So they want to see all the test scores, but obviously they can only use one set in considering the student for admission, okay? So keep that in mind. Usually, except for very few extenuating circumstances, we usually recommend that the students do send all their testing. And the main reason is something called superscoring. Does anyone know what superscoring is? It's not large fries and a large drink. What do you think superscoring is?
Superscoring is where they take the best score from each individual category and use those to put your best score.
Right. So if I took the SAT in June of my junior year, and then I took it again in October, and when I took it in June, my critical reading was 690, and then when I took it in October, it was 650. Okay, and it happens. You think it would go the other way, but it happens. So a school, and many private schools do the super scoring, they will take your 690. Now when I took my test in June, my math wasn't as good. But when I took my math in October, because I did a little tutoring, did a little brush up, I was good and I got a 670 on my math in October, which is awesome, and that will be the one. So they'll take the 690 from the critical reading June score, and they'll take your math from your October to give you a higher composite, which again will be to the student's benefit, okay? What you can't do is with score choice, I can't go in and select, I'm only going to send my October reading and my June, or vice versa, whatever I said, when I make things up, now I forget, my June math, right? If you send a test score, it is everything goes from October or everything goes from June. So oftentimes we get students and parents that are confused. Well, I only want to send the reading from this. Well, you can't do that. And that's why ultimately 99% of the time it is to the student's benefit to send all their test scores. So if the school allows super scoring, that they are in fact having all that information to do. In fact, Common App, for those of you that have seniors or had students that have gone through the college application process, Common App is the application that over 400 schools in the United States use, primarily private schools, for applications. They now ask the students to report their test scores in a super score format. So they will report all their testing dates, but they will ask you, what is your highest critical reading? What is your highest math? And what is your highest writing? And that is what you report, okay? So the super scoring is fairly common with the SAT with private schools. What is not common, although it is becoming more popular, is super scoring on the ACT. Okay? Usually, there are some schools now that are going to that, but usually with the ACT, they are taking all the scores from one sitting. I don't quite know what the rationale behind that is, and it can be a little frustrating for some students when they could see what there would be, but there is the trend that more schools are doing super scoring for that. Okay, we have a little bit of time left and we would love to answer your questions. We're sure you have many. Yeah.